Hello and welcome to the Boro Breakdown podcast with Jonny and Dana, and in collaboration with Not the Top 20 with Ali Maxwell. Ali, thank you so much for joining us. And in this show, we're going to break down Boro's business and maybe even sprinkle in a prediction as well. So, Ali, let's kick things off about Boro's transfer business so far. How would you rate Middlesbrough's signings at the moment?
I think the signings that have been made are good. I'm very excited about Aidan Morris. I'm really excited that you guys, your recruitment team, have kind of been the ones to go out and get him, because the more that I read about him, the more I think he seems like a really excellent modern central midfielder who can do a bit of everything. And I'm pretty sure that will translate pretty well to the Championship and pretty well to Boro. So I'm excited about that. Then outside of that, you've got the kind of, I guess, what you might describe as the no-brainer of bringing back Luke Ayling. I couldn't believe when I saw he got 8 assists from January onwards, which it must be a similar amount of assists that he got in his whole career up to that point. I didn't even think of him particularly as like one of the more creative fullbacks at the level, just a really solid all-rounder, I thought. But, getting him back for a number of reasons I think makes sense. And then Bergzorg, to be honest with you, I'm sure we'll get into it. I wasn't a massive fan of his last season, but I have enough respect for the Boro recruitment team and generally the way that they operate. And I think the way that they scout players and the way that they look to sign players for what they might do in the future, more so than necessarily maybe what they've done in the past, to think that they've probably got a pretty strong idea of what he's going to bring to the table. And playing for Boro will be very different to playing for last season's Huddersfield team. So, yeah, I think, it's been fairly quiet in terms of incomings, hasn't it? I know there's been a lot of new contracts being dished out. I'm sure most of those will have been pretty well received, but I'm not that surprised that it's quiet because, I think Boro have a pretty good balance and a pretty good spread already within the squad. So I don't think there needed to be tons and tons of work done in terms of volume. And then also it's been quite slow overall in the Championship. I've spoken to a few people within Championship clubs, sporting directors in particular, who've been finding it quite frustrating, very slow, very difficult, very sort of sticky. Could be down to the Euros, could be down to the Premier League clubs wanting to keep their young players a bit longer than normal, could be down to the fact that, the domestic market is maybe not in the best shape in terms of, good quality, good value players for Championship clubs to sign from League One and League Two. So lots of clubs looking overseas. And I think I counted earlier, like at least 18 or 19 of the 24 teams have made either 4 or fewer signings. So you're in basically the same boat as everyone else.
It's probably a good thing, actually, that we're not making a lot of signings, because for me anyway, and I don't know, I'd like to get your thoughts on this as well, Ali. I feel like player retention is pretty important because we saw the direct consequence of a bit of an overhaul last summer. And, our sticky start to the season might have been actually down to the fact that we had so many players trying to get up to speed to the Michael Carrick way. So I kind of don't know really what your thoughts are on the importance of that.
Definitely, yeah. I think sometimes I can be a bit of a Scrooge when it comes to transfers in general. Like, they are very popular. People love them. They're very good for business as a content creators, as I'm sure you guys know. I remember a local journo who covers Huddersfield telling me last year that that website's best month for traffic is like July and August. More than half of that time, there's no actual football being played. It's just because of transfer rumours. So I feel like a bit of a Scrooge because it's actually not what gets me most excited about football. And it certainly isn't. I don't see it as like this panacea for we'll be an amazing team because we signed all these players. In fact, to your point, sometimes quite the opposite. So while there are a number of teams across the EFL who have signed 10, 12, 15, in Burton Albion's case, 20 players this summer, they are getting all the sort of column inches, all of the chat at the moment, but I don't necessarily see it as a good thing. So for sure, I think continuity is a bonus, particularly when you have a manager that generally I think is a very good manager and B, seems to have real authority at the club. I think it can only be a good thing overall. And then there's the fact that a lot of the players that you've signed over the last few years have either come from outside of the Championship or are probably beneath peak age. And so it would be a bit I think it'd be a bit stupid to start chopping and changing too much, because you don't buy those players. You do buy them with 2, 3, 4 seasons in mind. So to start chopping and changing too much when some of them have only had 1 season would, to me, seem not very smart.
I'm going to hopscotch towards maybe what Boro don't have right now. When you look at Middlesbrough's squad right this second, what's the one thing that you think it lacks?
Yeah, I was really searching for a strong answer here. My real answer is not a huge amount, because I think there is a pretty decent spread of players across all positions and with different profiles as well, particularly in the sort of front four. I think that's important. So I think if you told me that Boro could sign an amazing championship ready, peak age, left-footed centre-back, I think I would grab that for Boro, because that's always good to have. Like, I'm thinking of a Wesley Hutt type signing. He plays for Watford. I think he might be leaving soon. Someone like him who's got really good passing range, but is also big and strong. Clearly, Matt Clark is back and fit and did really well and is kind of growing back into being more of himself. But I just think for insurance purposes, in case Clark can't continue at that level, if there's more injuries, or even just have another option there, I think that would probably be something that I would look at. And then basically, if you told me that you could get a game-changing loanee or two, someone like Cameron Archer, someone like Ramsey, not necessarily those players or even those positions, but that sort of proper premium loanee, I think that would be great. And I'm sure that's what the club are working towards, because they've done pretty well out of the loan market over the last few years. So I don't think there are large gaps in terms of the types of players needed to have a balanced squad for Carrick to work with. I guess it's just the case now where if someone becomes available within your price range or on loan, then, and if they are without a doubt going to be an upgrade on what you already have, then maybe you do it. Or maybe you just start the season and see where you are with a week or two to go at the window.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing as well, that you are maybe stretching for an answer there, because it probably indicates that Boro don't have a lot of gaps within that squad that they absolutely need to fill. Whereas I think obviously last summer that was the case. You touched on him a little bit earlier, Luke Ayling. What's your thoughts on that signing? Because as you mentioned, he ended the season really strongly, but keen to get your thoughts on him throughout the season, the whole season, rather than just 6 months.
Yeah, he got phased out at Leeds, didn't he? And it was, I don't know the full details there, but it seemed to happen. Everyone kind of knew it was happening, and everyone's, the fans absolutely loved him. He was one of the most popular Leeds players for a long time. But I think after a couple of years in the Prem, where the team struggled, which leaves a lot of criticism normally leveled at various players, and then Ayling himself is probably not, well, he isn't a Premier League level fullback anyway, so it's not that surprising that maybe he wasn't standing out. As it is, I kind of think that at this level, and particularly in the role that he played for you guys, where he was able to support attacks clearly with 8 assists, but he wasn't necessarily being asked to cover 14k up and down each week, and actually in the kind of the modern way, to use that phrase, tucking in quite a lot, just holding his position. Like the development of the fullback role, even in the last 3 seasons, has been absolutely insane, where like he was, for under Bielsa at Leeds and at Bristol City before then, he was a bit of a flyer. Like, he really did cover a lot of ground, and he would often be in the final third swinging in crosses. And actually, like, there was a time where that profile suddenly became what everyone wanted on both sides. And now we're in a position where you probably only want one of those on one side, and some teams don't want either of those on either side because they want their wingers holding the width. So this is what I like about your squad, and how much clarity I think there is for presumably for Carrick and his team, but even for you guys and for people like me. I look at the squad, we know broadly what formation and broadly what style you're going to play, and even in the detail, like what happens out wide. Okay, well, on the left side, you're generally going to have someone in an attacking role that will tuck inside and almost sort of support the Azaz as more of a number 10 or get close to the striker, and then you're probably going to have a Bangura or an Engel holding the width. And I think they're slightly different. Bangura is a bit more of a dribbler, isn't he? And Engel a bit more of kind of an all-rounder. And then on the right side, you're going to have Jones, all being well, holding the width. And I think he had a really strong second half of last season. And the right back will tuck in and offer that sort of what do they call it? Transition defense cover and all that, rest defense and all that sort of stuff. So I think it suits Ayling very well and Smith pretty well. I think it was a no-brainer to get him back, particularly because everyone raves about him as a dressing room personality as well, which has got to be a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just you mentioned the left-hand side as well, and there's a player obviously we did sign who's can play on the left and also centre forward. And you see a little bit of him last year in Delano Bergzorg. You mentioned earlier that you weren't particularly keen on Bergzorg, so I'd just be really keen to hear your thoughts on Boro's signing him, and also what do you think he could offer us?
Yeah, I wasn't that keen on him because I felt like he, from what I saw of him, he looked like he had quite an individualistic mentality.
Yeah.
Now, Huddersfield were a bad team, and it wasn't fun playing up front for Huddersfield. And frankly, I'm not even sure his natural position is a number 9 anyway. But they played with wing backs, and they didn't really play with wingers or wide forwards. So for the most part, he was part of a front 2. He's quite often playing with like a Karoma, who's also not a number 9. So it was a bit of a mess at the top of the pitch. But I felt like because he was quite starved of service, quite often when Bergzorg got the ball, he just tried, it was like he was in the playground. He was just trying to dribble, go himself and score a worldie. His shooting wasn't great. I think even if you watch back the goals that he did score, like a couple of them are really bad goalkeeping. So, I think there's a lot that I didn't love. I think if I was to sort of be a bit less judgmental and a bit more thoughtful about it when it comes from a Boro point of view, I expect him to play off the left for you guys more so than as Latalat's replacement number 9. That might be wrong, but that's personally how I see him probably providing the most impact. And also when I look at the squad and the types of players that you have, and you look at the data when it comes to dribbling and 1v1 threat and ability, Isaiah Jones is a massive standout for his dribbling numbers, both sort of volume and success rate last season. But outside of Jones, you don't have that many like dribblers in the front line. You've got, creative guys like Azaz or McGree, who's a bit of an all-rounder, and Force, who's more of a goal scorer. And I think Gilbert's, as I understand it, quite good on the ball, but I haven't seen too much of him. So I think just purely getting someone who is very dribbly, and that is Bergzorg. He's so tall. He can go both ways. So I think he's just very hard to stop once he gets going. And I think that is a good profile for you to add to the team. So I'm willing to suggest that maybe the whole sort of stink around Huddersfield last season was the main reason for him performing poorly. But I would personally be keeping a close eye on sort of his general temperament and his attitude as you see it. If he is coming off the bench, is he coming off the bench with a real appetite to make an impact, or is he looking a bit grumpy that it's not going his way? I think that's, he's one of those guys that could feasibly win you a game off the bench because he's got quality. So I just hope that's what happens.
I think he'll excite and frustrate in equal measure. So I think he'll be the quintessential championship player in that regard. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a few Boro fans maybe turning on him at a point, to be fair, just because of what you said there, that individualistic kind of nature. We definitely did see that when we did a lowdown on him. Bit of a tough one here for you, potentially, Ali. If you could make one signing for this Middlesbrough team this summer, who would that be and why? I'm quite excited for this.
Yeah, I mean, Ryan Giles is a cop-out answer because
if you didn't mention Ryan Giles, I would have pulled you up on it.
I mean, he'd be an amazing addition for all the reasons that you guys already know, because we've already seen him play for Boro under Carrick, and I think we know that he can offer a lot to this team. And more to the point, this team and its style is probably a better fit for him than almost any other in the Championship. So I don't know what's going on there with Hull, but I think that would be really exciting if you could get him. It slightly flies in the face, though, of what I said about giving players time that you've signed for a long term. So like Engel, for example, I would say in terms of a first impression of a new player last season, he had one of the worst. I think the first two times I watched him, he looked terrified. I couldn't really believe it because we'd had some quite good reviews as well. From those who follow football outside the UK. However, I think it's really important to flag up that I think he came on really strong. I think he played pretty well, actually. And I think he could easily kick on again and be a really good all-rounder. He's not going to be Ryan Giles in terms of delivery, but I think, he's clearly pretty sturdy. his data is good both with and without the ball. So I would definitely if it is Engel all season, I think I'd be quite excited to see him kick on again. I think that could end up looking like a really good signing at the end of this season. And then Bangura, I know a bit less about, haven't seen too much of him, but his dribbling numbers for fullbacks are unbelievable. So again, I'm kind of interested to watch a bit more of him. But no, I mean, Giles is one of those that I mentioned. If you can get him, you just do, because you've got a good chance this season. I think a better chance than last season in terms of challenging at the top when you look at the teams around you compared to last season. So I think you probably try and do that. Just in terms of some other names that sprung to mind, I suppose I've just spoken about Bergzord probably playing off the left, but I was looking at maybe a left-sided 1v1 specialist winger, just to kind of add a profile that I don't necessarily think exists in the squad aside from maybe Bergzorg. And I wondered what Mikey Johnston's availability is. He was on loan at West Brom from Celtic last season, and it seemed like Celtic weren't that fussed about letting him go. And he obviously did pretty well, scored a few worldies. He's a good dribbler as well. And I think that could be quite an interesting addition for you guys. Others I thought of were Blackburn seem to be in a bit of a weird spot at the moment, where even though they sold Adam Wharton for loads of money and might be selling Smodics as well, feels like things are a bit strange there. So I wondered whether if you could test their resolve with a bid for Tyrese Dolan. I think he'd be a really nice Boro player, because he can play in basically all of the positions in the front four, great in the press, super skillful and quick and low center of gravity, can set up goals and score them as well. I think he'd be a class Boro squad player if you could get him for a good price. So those were just a couple of names that sprang to mind.
Yeah, I want to broaden out a little bit, and I know obviously you guys cover all of the football league, so I feel like I wanted to get your thoughts on just the Championship specifically. In terms of some of business, like you mentioned at the start, that it has been fairly quiet, and for whatever reason, it has been. Obviously, probably maybe the Euros probably played a part in that. But is there any club that you think that Boro fans should probably keep an eye out in the Championship this season?
Yeah, I mean, just based on transfer business, it has been pretty slow, and I don't know definitively if there's a club that has very obviously completely raised their ceiling and just through transfers changed what they were like from last season. But I think you'd flag up Millwall just because they signed Tanganga, who they had on loan from Spurs last season, and he was excellent, and they've managed to get him, which I think could be a great signing for them. They also signed the best keeper in League One from last season, called Lucas Jensen. I think that'll be a good signing for them. And then Langstaff, the Notts County striker, who's been top scorer in the National League and then in League Two in consecutive seasons. I'm a little lower on, or I'm a little less certain on him, just because he's the type of striker that really needs chances created for him. And I don't see Millwall as a team that will create loads of chances for him inside the box. But I think they've been interesting. That the best answer is probably Sheffield Wednesday, who have signed, I think, the most in the Championship. Them and Oxford are both in double figures. But also, they've still got the majority of the players that Danny Röhl completely revolutionized last season. They were the worst team in the league, and then all of a sudden they were probably a top 10 team at the very least. And they've kept the majority of the guys that he had performing really well. So I guess they've kept that sort of core of players who already know how to play under Röhl, and then they've added quite a few other options. I wouldn't say any of them are oh my god, this guy's insanely good, but just again adding depth and quality, and probably a few players that are more suited to a quite intense Danny Röhl style of play. So it's probably Sheffield Wednesday overall. Two guys from overseas, Svante Ingelsson from Hansa Rostock and Olaf Kubacki from Poland. Those are the sorts of guys I love, because I reckon one of them will be back on loan in their native homeland within 6 months. But one of them might be incredible.
You absolutely love those sounds, don't you? And also, I could never pronounce those words at all.
I was going to say, someone will have a difficulty trying to say that. So I think you did well there, Ali.
Yeah. I can't wait for Maddo to do that. Obviously, to even try that. He never gets a name right, to be honest, for Maddo, but he'll give it a go. We've got one final question for you, Ali. I know it's a little bit too early in terms of predictions. Obviously, it's still July when we're talking to you, but have you got any gut feelings on Boro this season at all?
I think right now I haven't. I'm doing my research for our 1 to 24s at the moment, and it's a lot. It's is probably about 5 or 6 hours per division, and I'm doing it in reverse order. So I've done League 2, I'm halfway through League 1, I haven't done Champ yet. So I don't feel like I've got a great snapshot of the league as a whole, which is what I like to have before I make a prediction. But if you take out the 3 teams coming down from the Prem, I would expect Boro to be in the top 3 of those that were at this level last year, plus the teams that come up from League 1. Obviously, Leeds are kind of the whale there that you'd need to, be challenging with. But outside of Leeds, I don't see why Boro wouldn't be right up there. So then the question is, how strong will Burnley and Luton and Sheffield United be? And I don't think there's anyone in the world that thinks that they seem as strong as the teams that came down last season. So that is quite positive, I think, for you guys. I imagine it sounds quite positive. It's what I'm saying is between 1st and 6th, basically.
We'll take it.
Yeah,
when we do our not the top 20 1 to 24s, me and George have to do our own ones, and then we have to mash them together. So Boro might be 10th in the not the top 20 1 to 24s because George might absolutely hate what he sees.
Oh yeah, I hope he doesn't. Yeah, I really hope he doesn't. I mean, just make me feel terrible about it all. A little bit nervous about this season, actually, to be honest. But we can chat about that probably about that next week, Dana. But Ali, thank you so much for joining us and taking us through your thoughts on Boro Summer so far. If you want to find out more about Ali Not Top 20, go and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Go and subscribe to any podcast provider that you use, because it is pretty much the best coverage you're going to get about outside the Premier League as well. So do go and subscribe to them. And for us as well, Dana will be back next week as part of our preview show, where we might even do our 1 to 24s and get it terribly, terribly wrong if you've watched our last preview shows as well. But for right now, this has been the Boro Breakdown podcast, and that was like Boro Match Day Chat in a pod. Up the Boro.